The letter was clenched in Katherine Foster's trembling hands as the stagecoach rumbled to a halt, dust billowing around the wheels. Arizona Territory, 1885, a place and time she'd only read about in books. After 3 weeks of grueling travel from Boston, she had finally arrived in Castle Dome, a mining settlement nestled in the rugged Yuma County wilderness. Last stop, Castle Dome. The driver called out, his voice weathered from years of shouting over the pounding of hooves and the creak of wagon wheels. Katherine smoothed her travel-worn blue dress, tucked a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear, and gathered her courage along with her 2 valises. One contained her clothing and personal items, the other held her most precious possessions, her books. She stepped down onto the dusty Main Street, the Arizona sun immediately beating down on her pale skin. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a weather-beaten face approached. His expression was unreadable beneath the shadow of his Stetson, but his eyes, a piercing blue, assessed her with unmistakable disappointment. "Miss Foster?" he asked, his voice deep and rough like stones tumbling down a hillside. "Yes," she replied, extending her gloved hand. "You must be Mr. Hawkins." Preston Hawkins looked at her hand for a moment before taking it in his calloused one. "That's right, Preston Hawkins." He released her hand quickly, then glanced at her luggage. "That all you got?" "Yes." "I travel light," she said, though the book valise was deceptively heavy. He nodded, picking up both bags with ease. "Wagons over here." As they walked toward a weathered buckboard wagon, Katherine felt his sidelong glances. She knew what he saw: a woman of 23, slender but not delicate, with features more thoughtful than beautiful, and eyes that betrayed an intelligence that had served her well as a schoolteacher in Boston, but had ultimately made her unmarriageable in polite society. The ride to the Hawkins ranch was long and mostly silent. The landscape stretched endlessly around them, vast, untamed, and beautiful in its harshness, so different from the crowded streets and manicured gardens of Boston. "Your advertisement said you needed a wife who could cook, clean, and help with the ranch," Katherine finally said, breaking the silence. "I want to assure you I'm capable of all those things." Preston kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Advertisement also said I wanted someone practical." "Someone without heirs," Katherine's spine stiffened. "I don't have heirs, Mr. Hawkins." "Call me Preston," he said, then hesitated. "Your letter didn't mention you were educated." "I didn't think it relevant. Does my education pose a problem?" Preston adjusted his grip on the reins. "Educated women don't tend to last out here. Too soft for ranch life, too many expectations." "I can assure you I have no unreasonable expectations," Katherine replied, her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. "I came here with my eyes open. We'll see," was all he said. By the time they arrived at the Hawkins ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in vivid oranges and deep purples. The ranch house was modest but solidly built, with a broad porch and a weathered swing. A barn and several outbuildings dotted the property, along with corrals containing horses and cattle. Preston helped her down from the wagon, then carried her bags onto the porch. "It ain't much," he said, "but it's home." The interior was clean but sparse: a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and doors leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. The furniture was functional rather than decorative, and there were no books visible anywhere. "You'll sleep here for now," Preston said, showing her to a small but neat bedroom. "There's a washroom out back. Dinner in an hour." Left alone, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed and fought back tears. She had come too far to turn back now. This was her new life, for better or worse. She had chosen this path after her father's death left her penniless and without prospects in Boston. Being a mail-order bride had seemed a practical solution, a chance for a new beginning. She unpacked her clothing, then opened her second valise reverently. Inside were her treasures: Shakespeare, Austen, Dickens, and volumes of poetry, history, and science. She arranged them on the small bedside table, drawing comfort from their familiar spines. At dinner, She served Preston a hearty stew she had prepared, along with fresh biscuits. "This is good," he admitted after several silent bites. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me before she passed," Katherine replied, "and I improved through books and practice." Preston's expression darkened at the mention of books. "About that, I saw your collection." Katherine tensed. "Yes. What use are all those books out here? This is ranching country. We work with our hands, not our minds. Books have value everywhere, Mr. Hawkins Preston. They're companions, teachers, and windows to places we may never see in person." He frowned. "Sounds like foolishness to me. My last wife, she had notions too, couldn't handle the reality of ranch life." Katherine's heart sank further. "I'm sorry to hear that. May I ask what happened to her?" "Fever took her. 3 years ago." His voice was flat, but Katherine detected pain beneath the surface. "Left me with the ranch and no help to run it." "I'm very sorry for your loss," Katherine said sincerely. Preston nodded once, then continued eating. After a few more minutes of silence, he spoke again. "I don't need a wife with her head in the clouds. I need someone practical, someone who understands this life." "I understand practical necessity," Katherine assured him. "My education doesn't make me less capable of hard work." He looked skeptical but said nothing more. That night, as Katherine prepared for bed, she heard movement outside her door. When she opened it, she found Preston standing there looking uncomfortable. "Something I've been meaning to ask," he said gruffly. "In your letter, you mentioned you were a teacher." "Yes, I taught at a girls' school in Boston for 5 years. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Would you read something to me?" The request surprised her. "Read to you, of course. What would you like me to read?" Preston disappeared briefly and returned with a worn newspaper. "Just the news. Haven't had time to read it myself." Katherine took the paper, noticing it was several weeks old. "I'd be happy to." They settled in the main room, Katherine in a wooden rocking chair and Preston in his armchair by the fireplace. She began reading about national events, then local news from around the Arizona Territory. Preston listened intently, his eyes sometimes on her, sometimes on the fire. When she finished, he simply said, "Thank you," and stood to retire to his room. "Preston," she called after him. "If you'd like, I could read to you regularly, in the evenings, perhaps." He paused at his bedroom door. "Maybe we'll see." The next morning, Katherine rose before dawn, determined to prove her worth. By the time Preston emerged from his room, she had breakfast on the table: eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits with gravy. "You're up early," he commented, taking his seat. "I thought it best to start as I mean to go on," she replied, pouring him coffee. After breakfast, Preston showed her around the ranch. The property was larger than she had initially thought, with grazing land extending toward distant mountains. "We've got 50 head of cattle," he explained, 10 horses and some chickens. "I do most of the ranching work, but I need someone to keep the house, tend the garden, and look after things when I'm away." "I can do that," Katherine assured him. "It's hard work," Preston warned. "Harder than teaching proper young ladies to recite poetry." Katherine bit back a sharp response. "I understand, and I'm ready for it." The days that followed fell into a pattern. Katherine rose early to prepare breakfast, then spent her days cleaning, cooking, tending the vegetable garden, and learning to care for the chickens. The work was indeed hard, physically demanding in ways her teaching career had never been, but she approached each task with determination. Preston spent most daylight hours working with the cattle or mending fences, returning for meals and then heading out again. He was not unkind, but he remained distant, watching Katherine as if waiting for her to fail or complain. She didn't. Despite blistered hands, aching muscles, and exhaustion that left her nearly stumbling to bed each night, Katherine refused to show weakness. She had made her choice, and she would see it through. A week after her arrival, Preston returned from town with more newspapers and, surprisingly, a letter for Katherine. "From Boston," he said, handing it to her. She recognized her friend Margaret's handwriting immediately and tucked the letter away to read in private later. That evening, Preston asked her to read the newspapers again. This time, he seemed more relaxed as he listened, occasionally asking questions about the events she described. When she finished, he hesitated, then said, "You have a nice way of reading, makes the stories come alive." "Thank you," Katherine replied, pleased by the unexpected compliment. "Would you like me to read something else sometime? I have several books." Preston's expression clouded. "Don't need fancy books, newspapers fine." Despite his resistance, the nightly reading sessions continued. After a long day's work, they would sit by the fireplace, and Katherine would read from whatever newspapers or agricultural bulletins Preston brought home from town. 2 weeks into her stay, a severe thunderstorm struck the ranch. Rain pounded the roof while lightning split the sky and thunder shook the windows. Preston had been out checking on a sick calf and returned drenched and shivering. "You're soaked through," Katherine said, immediately stoking the fire. "You need to get warm before you catch your death." Preston didn't argue, changing into dry clothes while Katherine prepared hot coffee and stew. As they sat by the fire, the storm raging outside, an unusual ease settled between them. "Storm like this reminds me of the night my pa died," Preston said suddenly. "I was 14. Lightning spooked the horses and he went out to calm them, found him the next morning, trampled. Katherine's heart ached for the young boy he'd been. "I'm so sorry, that must have been terrible for you." Had to take over the ranch then, no time for schooling after that, understanding dawned. "Is that why you never learned to read properly?" Preston's head snapped up, his expression defensive. "I can read some, basic words, enough to get by." "But not enough to read a newspaper or a book," Katherine said gently. He looked away, jaw tight. "Never had time to learn more." "Ranch takes all I got. Would you like me to teach you?" she offered. "We could set aside time each day." "I'm too old to be playing student," he scoffed, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "No one is ever too old to learn, Preston." He was quiet for so long that Katherine thought he was ignoring her suggestion. Finally, he asked, "Why would you want to teach me? You think I'm just some ignorant rancher." "I've never thought that," Katherine said sincerely. "I think you're a man who's worked hard his entire life. Someone who built all this," she gestured around them, through determination and grit. "That's admirable, not ignorant." The firelight revealed a vulnerability in his eyes that he quickly masked. "I'll think about it." The next night, after Katherine had read the newspaper, Preston cleared his throat. "That book you've been reading at night, the one with the red cover. What is it?" Katherine smiled. She'd been reading Pride and Prejudice before bed. "It's a novel by Jane Austen. About a young woman and a proud, difficult man who initially misunderstand each other. Would you read some of it, instead of the newspaper?" "I'd be delighted to." And so began a new ritual. Each night, Katherine would read a chapter or two of Pride and Prejudice, explaining unfamiliar terms or contexts as needed. Preston listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that revealed an insightful mind undiminished by his lack of formal education. As they progressed through the book, Katherine also began giving Preston reading lessons. To her surprise, he was an eager and dedicated student, practicing his letters in the evenings and working through simple texts during rare moments of daylight leisure. "Never told anyone before," he admitted one night after successfully reading a full paragraph on his own. "About not being able to read proper. Was ashamed, I guess." "There's no shame in it," Katherine assured him. "You've accomplished so much without advantages others take for granted." Their relationship began to shift. Preston's initial wariness gave way to respect, and Katherine found herself admiring his intelligence, determination, and the quiet dignity with which he faced challenges. One evening, as they finished a chapter of Pride and Prejudice, Preston asked, "Do you miss it? Boston, I mean, your old life?" Katherine considered the question carefully. "I miss certain aspects, my students, my friends, the libraries and bookshops," she smiled, "but I don't regret coming here." "Even though I was unwelcoming, you were cautious," she corrected. "And not without reason. We were strangers after all." Preston's eyes held hers. And now we're becoming friends, I hope, he nodded, his expression thoughtful. Friends, yes. As spring progressed into summer, the ranch demanded even more work. Cattle needed moving to higher pastures, crops required tending, and preparations for the coming fall and winter consumed their days. Katherine threw herself into learning everything she could about ranch life. She learned to ride better, to help with simple veterinary care for the animals, and even to mend fences. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned, but she found satisfaction in the tangible results of her labor. Preston, meanwhile, continued his reading lessons with determination. By midsummer, he could read simple books on his own, though he still preferred having Katherine read to him in the evenings. It's different when you read it, he explained when she asked why. You bring the words to life. Their marriage remained unconsummated. Preston had been clear from the beginning that he wanted a partner and helpmate first, with the possibility of more developing over time. Katherine had agreed to these terms, understanding the practicality of such an arrangement. What she hadn't anticipated was how her feelings for Preston would evolve. His gruff exterior had initially masked a thoughtful, intelligent man with a dry humor that increasingly revealed itself as they grew comfortable with one another. She found herself looking forward to their evening readings not just for the books, but for his company. In July, visitors arrived unexpectedly, a neighboring rancher named Thomas Clark, his wife Eliza, and their daughter Marion. They had come to discuss a potential cattle drive partnership with Preston. Didn't know Hawkins had taken a wife again, Thomas commented during dinner. How long have you two been married now? 3 months, Preston answered with a glance at Katherine. And how do you like ranch life, Mrs. Hawkins? Eliza asked. I understand you're from back east, Boston, Katherine confirmed. It's been an adjustment, but a rewarding one. She's educated, Preston added, surprising Katherine with the note of pride in his voice. Was a teacher before coming here. Thomas raised his eyebrows. A school teacher? Bit overqualified for ranch work, aren't you? Before Katherine could respond, Preston said firmly, Katherine's intelligence is an asset to this ranch. She's learned more about cattle and farming in 3 months than most do in years. The warmth that spread through Katherine at his defense was matched only by the quiet smile he gave her across the table. After dinner, the men retired to the porch to discuss business, while Katherine and Eliza cleared the table. I was a mail-order bride too, Eliza confided as they washed dishes. Came from St. Louis 15 years ago. Was it difficult for you? The adjustment, Eliza nodded, nearly went back home that first winter, but Thomas and I found our way to each other eventually. She glanced meaningfully at Katherine. Preston seems different with you, softer somehow. He was so closed off after Rebecca died. His first wife, Katherine said, yes, lovely woman but delicate. The frontier was hard on her. Eliza dried a plate carefully. Preston blamed himself when she fell ill. Thought if he'd been a better provider, could have afforded a doctor sooner. She shook her head. He carried that guilt a long time. Katherine absorbed this information, understanding better now some of Preston's initial reserve. That night, after their visitors had departed with promises of future gatherings, Preston seemed unusually quiet. Is something wrong? Katherine asked as they sat for their evening reading. Preston hesitated. Thomas asked if I was happy with our arrangement. And what did you tell him? I said I was. He looked directly at her. Are you happy here, I mean? Katherine considered the question seriously. Yes, I believe I am, more than I expected to be. Relief visibly washed over him. Good, that's good. She opened their current book, Treasure Island, but Preston placed his hand over hers, stopping her. Katherine, he said, his voice low. I'm not good with words, never have been, but I want you to know that I'm grateful for what you've brought to this place, to my life. The simple sincerity of his statement touched her deeply. Thank you, Preston. That means a great deal to me. His hand remained on hers, warm and strong. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, something that made Katherine's heart beat faster. Then he withdrew his hand and nodded toward the book. We left Jim hiding in the apple barrel, about to overhear the pirates. Katherine began to read, but she was acutely aware of how Preston watched her, not just listening to the story, but seeing her in a way he hadn't before. August brought scorching heat and the threat of drought. Preston worked from dawn until well after dusk, moving cattle to what grazing remained and hauling water from the creek when the well ran low. Katherine took to bringing him lunch in the fields, riding out on the gentle mare Preston had begun teaching her to ride shortly after her arrival. "You're becoming a proper horsewoman," he commented one day as she dismounted smoothly, carrying a basket with sandwiches and fresh lemonade. "I had an excellent teacher," she replied with a smile. They sat in the shade of a large cottonwood, eating together while a light breeze offered momentary relief from the heat. "I received another letter from my friend Margaret yesterday," Katherine said. "She's engaged to be married this winter." Preston nodded, taking a long drink of lemonade. "Will you want to attend the wedding?" "No, I don't think so. The journey is too long and expensive for such a brief visit." "We could afford it," he said. "If you wanted to go," Katherine was touched by the offer. "Thank you, but my place is here now." She hesitated, then added, "Unless. Would you prefer I go for a visit, I mean?" Preston looked genuinely surprised. "Why would I want that?" "Sometimes I wonder if you regret answering my letter, if you found me unsuitable." He set down his glass, his expression serious. "Katherine, you're the best thing that's happened to this ranch to me in years. I don't want you going anywhere." The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. "I'm glad," she said softly, "because I don't want to go anywhere either." They held each other's gaze until Preston cleared his throat and looked away. "Better get back to work. Those fences won't mend themselves." As he rose to leave, Katherine impulsively caught his hand. "Preston, would you join me for a special dinner tonight to celebrate?" "Celebrate what?" She smiled. 3 months since I arrived, and the fact that neither of us has run away yet. His laugh, rare and wonderful, warmed her more than the summer sun. "I'll be there," he promised, squeezing her hand briefly before releasing it. That evening, Katherine prepared a meal that would have impressed even Boston's finest hostesses: roast chicken with herbs from her garden, vegetables she had grown herself, and a berry pie made from wild blackberries she had gathered near the creek. She also took special care with her appearance, wearing her best dress, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair, which she wore loose around her shoulders instead of in her usual practical bun. When Preston entered the house after washing up, he stopped short at the sight of the table set with their best dishes and Katherine standing beside it. "You look—" he began, then seemed at a loss for words. "Thank you," she said, feeling a blush rise in her cheeks under his appreciative gaze. "You clean up rather nicely yourself." Dinner was different from their usual meals, not just in the food, but in the conversation. They talked of books they had read together, of plans for the ranch, of memories from their separate pasts that had somehow led them to this shared present. "I never expected to find someone like you," Preston said as they finished the pie. "When I placed that advertisement, I thought I'd get someone practical, undemanding, someone who'd just fit into the spaces Rebecca left." Katherine nodded, understanding. "And instead you got an overeducated Boston schoolteacher who brought too many books and too many questions." "Exactly," he agreed with a smile that transformed his face. "The best mistake I ever made." After dinner, they moved to the porch swing where they often sat on pleasant evenings. The night was beautiful, with stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds on velvet. "Would you read out here tonight?" Preston asked. "Under the stars." "Of course," Katherine replied, going inside to fetch their current book. As she read, Preston's arm gradually settled around her shoulders. The gesture felt natural, as if they had sat this way 100 times before, though in truth it was the first time he had held her this way. When she finished the chapter, neither made a move to go inside. Instead, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and feeling the gentle rock of the swing. "Katherine," Preston said finally, his voice low, "I've been thinking—" "Yes, this marriage of ours. It started as a practical arrangement." It did, she agreed, her heart beginning to race. But I find myself. He took a deep breath. I find myself caring for you more than I expected, more than just as a partner or a friend. Katherine turned to look at him, finding vulnerability and hope in his eyes. I care for you too, Preston, very much. I'm not an educated man, he continued. Not cultured or refined, but I promise you this: I'll work every day to be worthy of you, to make this ranch a good home for us both. You already are worthy, she said softly. Your worth isn't measured in books read or words known, but in the kind of man you are. And you, Preston Hawkins, are a good man. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he kissed her gently at first, then with growing confidence as she responded, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. When they parted, Preston rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Katherine. I think I have for some time now. I love you too, she whispered, the truth of the words filling her heart with joy. That night, they truly became husband and wife, their practical arrangement transforming into something deeper and more meaningful. As summer faded into autumn, Katherine and Preston grew closer, building a partnership that balanced his practical knowledge of ranching with her organizational skills and quick intelligence. Together, they made improvements to the ranch that Preston had long considered but never implemented: a better irrigation system for the garden, expanded chicken coops that produced more eggs to sell in town, and careful record keeping that increased their profits. The reading lessons continued, with Preston making remarkable progress. By October, he could read most texts independently, though their evening reading ritual remained a cherished part of their day. I have something to show you, Preston said one evening after dinner. Come with me. He led Katherine to the barn, where he unveiled a project he'd been working on secretly: a beautiful oak bookshelf. For your books, he explained, so they can have a proper home in our house, not just stacked beside the bed. Katherine ran her fingers over the smooth, polished wood. It's beautiful, Preston. When did you find time to make this? Early mornings, before you wake up. He looked pleased with her reaction. There's something else too. From behind the bookshelf, he produced a package wrapped in brown paper, from my trip to Yuma last week. Katherine unwrapped it to find 3 new books, recent publications she had mentioned wanting to read. How did you? Had the shopkeeper write down the titles you mentioned, asked him to order them special. Preston looked almost shy. Wanted to surprise you. Deeply touched, Katherine wrapped her arms around his neck. Thank you, not just for the books, but for understanding what they mean to me. They're part of you, he said simply, and I love all of you. As winter approached, Katherine made an important discovery: she was expecting a child. When she shared the news with Preston, his joy was boundless. A baby, he kept saying, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. Our baby. The prospect of becoming parents deepened their connection further. Preston became even more protective, insisting Katherine rest more and hiring a local boy to help with the heavier chores. I'm pregnant, not invalid, she reminded him, though she was touched by his concern. Just want to take care of you both, he replied, kissing her forehead. Their first Christmas together was simple but meaningful. They exchanged modest gifts. Katherine gave Preston a fine leather journal for keeping ranch records, while he surprised her with a rocking chair he had commissioned from a craftsman in Castle Dome. For when the baby comes, he explained as she sat in it, testing its smooth motion. For reading to our child like you read to me. Snow came in January, blanketing the ranch in white. On particularly cold evenings, they would sit by the fire, Katherine reading aloud while Preston worked on simple woodcarving projects, toys for their expected child or small improvements for their home. Do you ever regret it? Preston asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her growing belly. Answering my advertisement, coming to a place so different from what you knew, Katherine considered the question seriously. I won't pretend it's been easy. There are days when I miss certain comforts or conveniences of city life. She turned to face him in the darkness. But no, I don't regret it, Not for a moment. This life, our life, has given me purpose and happiness I never found in Boston. Preston pulled her closer. When I placed that advertisement, I thought I just needed someone to cook my meals and keep my house. I never imagined I'd find a partner, a teacher, someone who would change my whole world. And I never imagined I'd find a man whose strength and gentleness would complement each other so perfectly, she replied, resting her head against his chest. A man who would value my mind as much as my ability to run a household. Spring arrived with new life everywhere, calves in the pastures, chicks in the coops, and green shoots pushing through the soil in Catherine's expanded garden. As her pregnancy progressed, Katherine found herself marveling at the parallel between the awakening land and the life growing within her. In early May, after a relatively easy labor attended by a midwife from Castle Dome and Eliza Clark from the neighboring ranch, Katherine gave birth to a healthy boy they named James Thomas Hawkins James, for Katherine's father and Thomas for Preston's. Preston, who had paced anxiously outside during the birth, was overcome with emotion when the midwife finally called him in to see his wife and son. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully cradling the tiny bundle. "Look what we made, Katherine." "He has your eyes," she observed tiredly but happily from the bed. "And your spirit, I'd wager," Preston replied with a gentle smile. "Poor boy won't stand a chance against two educated parents." As summer approached again, marking a full year since Katherine's arrival at the ranch, they held a small gathering to celebrate both their anniversary and James's baptism. The Clarks attended, along with several other neighboring families and the minister from Castle Dome. Katherine, now recovered from childbirth, stood proudly beside Preston as they welcomed their guests. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. The house expanded with a new room for James, the livestock increased, and even a small orchard planted that would bear fruit in years to come. "Hard to believe the change in this place," Thomas Clark commented to Preston as they watched their wives chatting while Katherine gently rocked James. "In just a year, you've done what most couldn't in 5. "Not me," Preston corrected. "Us. Katherine's the heart of it all." Later, as the guests departed and the golden light of evening settled over the land, Preston and Katherine sat on their porch swing, James sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. "I have something for you," Preston said, producing a small package from his pocket. Katherine unwrapped it to find a slim volume of poetry, Tennyson's works, beautifully bound in leather. "The first page," Preston urged. She opened it to find an inscription in Preston's now steady handwriting. "To Katherine, who taught me to read words on a page and love in my heart." With eternal gratitude and devotion, Preston, tears welled in her eyes. "It's beautiful, Preston." "There's something else," he said, taking a folded paper from his shirt pocket. "I've been practicing." The paper contained a letter, the first he had ever written entirely on his own. Katherine read it silently, her heart full. "My dearest Katherine, 1 year ago today you stepped off that stagecoach and changed my life forever. I thought I was getting a practical wife to help run this ranch. Instead, I got a partner, a teacher, and the love I never knew I was missing. When I told you that educated women don't last out here, I was wrong. Your education wasn't a weakness, it was your strength. And through you, it became mine too. Thank you for reading to me each night, for teaching me that words have power, for showing me that a man is never too old to learn or to love. Our son will grow up knowing both cattle and books, ranching and reading. He will have advantages I never had because of you. I love you more with each passing day. Yours always," Preston. Katherine looked up at her husband, tears streaming freely now. "You wrote this yourself?" Preston nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Every word. Took me 3 tries to get it right." "It's perfect," she whispered, leaning against him as James stirred slightly in her arms. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Preston slipped his arm around his family. "Read to us," he asked softly, "like you used to do just for me." Katherine opened the book of poetry, her voice clear and steady as she began to read. the words flowing out into the peaceful evening air. In her arms, their son slept contentedly while beside her. Preston listened not just to the poetry, but to the voice of the woman who had taught him that love and learning were not weaknesses, but the greatest strengths a person could possess. The educated mail-order bride and her cowboy had found in each other not just the partners they sought, but the teachers they needed. Together, they had built something neither could have created alone: a family, a thriving ranch, and a love story that would be told in the valleys and mountains of Arizona Territory for generations to come.